My major problem with espousing this reliance on religion, especially in governance, is that at the point where you say that your governance is based on religion, then the only thing that really matters after that point is who talks for God. And that is going to be the nexus of all the power. And the closer you get to being unanimous on that subject of, like, God running the show, the more important it becomes who talks for God. And I mean, within a short time, going down this road, we're Iran.
Exactly.
And it's like, who cares what the Congress thinks? Let's go consult the fundamentalists.
Yeah, the Shah.
They're the ones with the real power. They're the ones who talk to God, and we do want to do what God's telling us to do, right? So the only thing that really matters is what God thinks.
What will the name of the American Shah be? President? Vice President?
I don't know. I mean, I hate to think about this kind of stuff, but I mean, I think that's the natural route. I mean, you can't have it based on this, because, I mean, it's not anything that can be discussed. It's not anything that can be debated. It doesn't happen in the world of reason where governance has to take place. I mean, if you want to do something for religious reasons, it doesn't matter whether it works or not. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because you're going to get like a certain result. The desired result is that you're pleasing God. So any other result aside from pleasing God doesn't matter.
Yeah, that is creepy.
Yeah, I mean, so the whole methodology, I see that's why I don't think you can base governance on it, because governance has to be based on what works. Whereas, I mean, if you make a decision based on religious reasons, what works is completely immaterial. Your reward is spiritual.
And Zach, even if you could, it would be a lot harder to do so in a democracy, in a functioning democratic republic, because if that were the case, you're trying to please God in a democracy. There are a lot of different people with very different ideas of God and what God is and what God wants.
Speaking of religion and what works, we were sort of in the United States, we've sort of developed some ideologies that have some of the characteristics of religion too, and aren't necessarily what works. Like
the free market, Brendon?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking of the economy. Like, we should, always cut taxes but at the same time somehow try to be fiscally conservative, and how that cutting government spending in a recession is somehow going to have a positive effect. And that's, these things are ideologically motivated, but just aren't true. And it's kind of a shame that the problem just isn't religion, but it's sort of like a religious kind of thinking in general. I mean, maybe there is sort of an immediate problem with religion, but it's sort of unfortunate that religious thinking has, sort of infiltrated other aspects too. I just thought I'd throw that out there as a tangent.
Right. I've actually heard the term faith-based economics.
Well, now let me bring something back that we were talking about earlier about torture. Now, if we're so ideologically against torture no matter what, and we don't want to look at the actual results and whether it works or not, then why should somebody who believes in free market economics actually bother looking at the results to see if it works or not?
Exactly.
Well, I think there's a certain point where people all kind of buy into the notion that this is the superior process, and then, like, whatever flaws it has, it would be worse if we were doing something else. And it just becomes kind of a default position.
That's true.
They can always argue that, like, if there's anything wrong, it's because there's a vestige of regulation, or it would be much worse if there was more regulation,
or because we haven't gone far enough.
Exactly. So you can always kind of chalk something, because you're never going to find this perfect system that the free market advocates want. And I think nothing would be worse, actually, than them actually getting that system, because I think then the hollowness of it, morally speaking, would kind of become, fairly apparent really quickly, and there'd be nothing else to blame it on. No regulations that they could say, oh, well, this is the real problem, that this or that regulation still exists and is, interfering with the grand dream.
What happens will happen, I suppose.
Well, I don't see anything getting in the way of this kind of faith-based free market super ideology, just because it seems like it's tied in on so many different levels.
Yeah, I guess people are sort of, seeing through that, and it's not really I don't know.
Yeah.
Arguably it did. The faith-based free market ideology, arguably that's an example of sort of Darwinism in action. Basically, the people in power adopted the faith-based free market ideology. It caused a crash, and now, it's lost a little bit of credibility, I think, among most of the population.
Which doesn't matter because the population doesn't run the show.
Well, yeah, that's also true.
Unfortunately, it seems we're in a position where the corporations can kind of do what they want without having to worry about much of anything.
Yeah.
But the problem, I think, is always trying to get Americans to see how things look on the receiving end. Like, take, for example, do Americans see themselves in the movie Avatar? I mean, do they see themselves as like the mining company in that movie? Going in and...
I did not see the movie Avatar.
That's something... I mean, there's been a lot of conservative blowback against the film, and I think I'm not surprised by that. In the same way that I wasn't one of those people who was like, looking around all mystified at the conservative backlash against, the little Pixar movie about the robot either. I understood what the people in Pixar were saying, and I understand why conservative commentators didn't like it. And the same with Avatar. It's really kind of pointing at this imperialistic exploitation, which is resource-driven. It's funded utilizing mercenaries, etc.
Right, and what they're after is called unobtainium, which might as well be called MacGuffin.
Exactly. It's whatever you kind of want to put into that thing. But I thought, what I thought was actually fairly interesting? There was a demonstration recently in Palestine where a bunch of Palestinians dressed up as the Navi from the movie. And I thought it was a very interesting thing. It's like, can you make the connection? Can you see this when you don't want to see it, but it's still there?
Yeah, and what's great about that is that, there are protests there all the time, but this time they made the news.
Most Americans, I think they'll think that, oh yeah, well, we had some bad stuff going on, but, I had nothing to do with that. I think our sort of, the individualism we have, which is a good thing to have, individualism, I think. But I think it also sort of lets people off the hook a little bit for the actions of the, institutions that they elected and are complicit in. So I think your typical conservative will see these things and say, oh, well, I had nothing to do with that. That was all those crazy, liberals or something in Congress.
Well, you can always blame the other people, but yeah, like I was saying earlier, what's the latest bipartisan piece of legislation to go through Congress? Patriot Act 1, Patriot Act 2, Patriot Act 3.
Yeah, and the people who vote for them, they don't think that they're to blame. And the people who vote for the people we just saw in the video we just watched, people are going to vote for them, and then when they get elected and then turn all fascist, and then, the people who voted for them start disagreeing with some of their policies, they're not going to think that, they're not going to make the connection between their vote and then the outcome. And I think that's something we need to do. If we have a democracy, we got to take responsibility. Like I take responsibility for voting for Barack Obama, and supporting him. And it seemed like such a great decision at the time, but in retrospect, I should have paid more attention to, the details of his actual record rather than just the platform he put out and the words that he said.
But I mean, I think, there were elements of Obama. It's sort of like, which Obama showed up.
Doesn't matter what's right. It's only wrong if you get caught. If consequences dictate my course of action, I should play God and just shoot you myself.